5 a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Stock futures pointed lower. Samsung's record profit failing to elevate shares after that unprecedented rally for the stock. Oil and gas seeing risk getting priced back in after tanker strikes in and around the Strait of Hormuz. And the NATO Summit kicks off in Turkey. Don't miss our interview with the Latvian Foreign Minister live from Ankara. Now let's get a check on markets around the world. An initial read from Samsung setting the tone today. Let's get straight to Winnie Su in Hong Kong. Winnie.
Good morning, Bonnie. It really all comes down to Samsung's preliminary earnings, which in fact was such a blowout with quarterly profits jumping 19-fold. But investors already had their expectations really high, so it was a bit of a sell-on news moment. We saw Samsung shares diving as much as 10% earlier today, which also triggered a trading halt in the Kospi, which was down about 5% at the end of the day. Now, the next event we are watching out for is, of course, that U.S. ADR listing for SK Hynix later this week, and that has provided a bit of a boost for the Korean won today. Now, flip the board, we take a look at the broader Asia market. Today, down about 1.5% on the benchmark, dragged down by tech, but we did see a bit of a rotation into sectors like financials. We have Japanese banks also rising on higher JGB yields. And speaking of yields, we did have Japan's 30-year bond auction seeing its strongest demand since 2019. Yields, in fact, actually dipped a bit at the beginning, but that soon reversed given the ongoing concerns when it comes to the fiscal expansionary plans.
All right, Winnie, lots of macro events in Asia setting the tone for markets around the world these days, and today is no exception. Let's get to London for a look at the European session now with Justina Lee. Justina.
Good morning, Bonnie. Now, it's one of those days where, Winnie is here to bring all the thrills and excitement, but Europe is just going slow and steady. There's less speculative fervor here, and of course, a way lower tech weighting that's probably helping the Stocks Europe 600 stay flat today. The FTSE 100 is up a little bit on the back of higher oil. Of course, the FTSE 100 has a lot of those oil majors, and that also explains the rise in German 10-year bond yields today. Also because of oil and also, some of that inflation outlook changing. And now we flip the board here. Something I don't always talk about is kind of French bond yields. And what we're seeing here is that there's been a widening gap between that and German yields. And that's on the back of growing concerns over the fiscal picture in France. And today we're also going to get a big headline as to whether Marine Le Pen, the far-right leader, will get to run for president again. But all eyes will be on budget in France in the fall, Bonnie.
Absolutely, Justina. Thank you so much, Justina Lee there. Here in the US, we have a little bit of a mixed picture, so we could be coming to the tail end of how Korea is shaping impressions here in the United States. It's really all about the chip trade at the end of the day and the memory trade and so on. And Samsung out with its preliminary details. We would get the full read at the end of the month. Not really helping, even though it beat 19-fold. We've seen that story several times in the most recent earnings season. So for now, we have US futures pointed lower to some extent, but we did get a rally yesterday. So Nasdaq 100 futures, for example, pointed to a decline of 1% at the open. That wouldn't even erase the gain that we saw yesterday, particularly for the Philly SOX index, which was up more than 2%. And Russell 2000 futures are unchanged right now. So we'll wait and see what happens in the session. In the meantime, let's get to bonds, because we are seeing those rise again 2 to 3 basis points across the board. We were above 450 on the 10-year just a little while ago, and we're firmly above 5% on the 30-year yield. An interesting movement to watch as we continue to listen to some Fed speak and try to see exactly how the data is going to be read by the Fed and by the market, of course, which the Fed wants to happen first. And then when it comes to energy complex, we are seeing those attacks in and around the Strait of Hormuz again, and that is adding a little bit of weight to the likes of Brent crude. New York crude was still below 70. European gas futures probably getting the most of it. They're up more than 4%. Let's get to some individual pre-market movers now. For that, we'll go back over to London and Chloe Melly.
Good morning, Bonnie. Micron this morning is taking quite the hit after those disappointing Samsung results. So those earnings had been really looked at by investors as something that could potentially reassure about the durability of this AI-driven rally. But unfortunately, Samsung was disappointing investors with those results. And so this now raises further questions about those sky-high valuations and sky-high investments. Moving on to some M&A with Vertex buying Crinetics, a pharma and that is really boosting the stock. We're up almost 100% there for Crinetics Pharma. This is a $10 billion deal, the biggest ever for Vertex. And finally, Rivian is offering to sell 75 million shares to meet the terms of a loan from the U.S. Department of Energy. This is leading the shares down. We're down about 7% this morning for Rivian, and this is overshadowing the guidance boost that we had actually last week. So a bit of weakness there for that company.
That'll always do it. Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe Melly there in London. Also coming up this hour, Katrina Dudley of Franklin Templeton joining to discuss tech valuations, earnings, and lots more. Let's get to the latest results now. Investors unimpressed, it seems, with Samsung's 19-fold quarterly profit surge. Shares of the world's biggest memory maker by market value slid more than 10% in Seoul, weighing on its global peers, particularly, though, in South Korea. Matt Bloxham of Bloomberg Intelligence joins us now for more. So, Matt, is this the tail end of what has been an incredible run? This was pretty much expected as Samsung really changes its business, right? And we don't even have all the details. We just got an initial read.
Yeah, that's right, an initial read, and I think, as you say, that this is kind of a story of travelling and then arriving, and we've seen consensus expectations for this quarterly revenue print increase by over 20% over the last 3 months. I think the market has kind of absorbed and adjusted to this big surge in demand for high bandwidth memory and the price increase that gone along with that. So, we've kind of reached the point where consensus is more or less aligned with what the market can actually deliver. And I think if you wanted to see the shares go higher, then really they needed to be kind of delivering a stronger beat than the kind of 1 or 2% on the top line that they delivered.
Yeah, I mean, the Kospi has doubled this year, and Goldman estimates that 90% of that was thanks to SK Hynix and Samsung, just those two companies alone, right? So we had a little bit of an NVIDIA problem in Korea. Here in the US, though, lots of other types of catalysts today. I mean, Walmart is lowering prices, but beyond that, SpaceX is joining the NASDAQ 100, and bullish calls are piling in from Wall Street. What happens today? Do we see SpaceX shares go higher, Matt, just because it's entering the NASDAQ 100?
It should be a kind of small underlying positive, but it's a technical issue. And I think when you look at the breakdown of the analysis, the free float's only 5%, and that affects how much passive funds have to adjust their portfolios. I think it's going to be less than a 1% weighting in the overall index. So I'm sure you will see some passive buying, but perhaps not a huge amount. And some of those passive funds will have bought in anticipation of this happening. But I think it's the start of maybe a series of technical underlying supports for the company, because the free float will increase over time, not least because lockups will expire for kind of anchor shareholders, including employees, and they will sell onto the market. So I think you'll kind of see these kind of technical supports come through the next 12 months or so. And obviously at some point it will get S&P 500 inclusion too, so that will be another support. But really, as a fundamental analyst, you kind of really need to look beyond the technicals and focus on the fundamentals. We've got a Starship rocket launch coming up hopefully sometime in July, and that takes on added significance because getting Starship to a scaled, reusable rocket platform supports lots of parts of the kind of future revenue growth story for the company, not least orbital data centers. So I think there will be a lot of focus on those events. And obviously we'll have their next quarterly results sometime in August, where we'll get a bit more scrutiny on the revenue trends and to what extent in particular things like the AI part of the business and Crook are starting to get some renewed momentum.
And Matt, we have 20 buys from analysts in our system, 4 holds and 1 sell. And of those 20 buys, the price targets we have, those price targets are all above where it's trading at right now. Matt Bloxham of Bloomberg Intelligence will be back later in the programme, and thank you. Oil climbing after reports of attacks on ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Sources telling Bloomberg that a Qatari LNG carrier was hit by a projectile near the Omani coast early this morning. Let's get more with Bloomberg Horizon's Middle East and Africa anchor, Abir Abu Omar. What is behind the latest spate of attacks? Abir, it seems there are more now than there were previously. Is it that they're not taking the correct route? They're not paying money? What is it?
That's exactly correct, Vonnie. It's the first one. It seems that Iran has been telling ships and tankers that are going through the Strait of Hormuz to stick to a route that it had laid out for them, and those that are not sticking to this route are being attacked. Now, the latest is, as you had alluded to in your intro, is this ship that we believe is linked to Qatar, laden with LNG, that was passing through the Strait of Hormuz this morning, that was attacked by the IRGC. And what we believe is that it was attacked because it just did not stick to the route that was laid out by Iran. It was going through the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz, closer to the coast of Oman. And that is not the first time we've seen such attacks happening, Vonnie, especially not throughout this period or since the MOU was signed last month. We've seen such attacks happen. We've seen the justification by the Iranian side saying that ships that do not stick to the path that Iran had laid out are prone to these attacks. And this really comes at a time where Iran is trying to assert dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, saying that not only will these ships be attacked, but also that once the negotiation period between Iran and the United States is over, it will start charging tolls and fees to ships that pass through, with concessions to some friendly countries, as it has been saying. One of them is China, for example. But these attacks, again, not the first time that we've seen them happening over the past month or so. But certainly ship owners and tankers are treading with a lot of caution in the Strait of Hormuz, and a lot of them are trying to stick to the route that Iran had laid out to avoid such incidents from happening again.
It would seem like the prudent thing to do. Abir, thank you so much. Abir Abu Omar. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Hedge funds are at their most bearish on the yen since 2007. Commodity Futures Trading Commission data show leveraged traders boosted bets on more losses in the yen to nearly 138,000 contracts as of June 30th. The currency remains one of the worst performers among major currencies. Lone Pine Capital is off to one of its best starts to a year, posting a 43% gain for investors through June. Its biggest U.S. holdings include Teradyne and Carpenter Technology. The firm's short book was a significant contributor to those returns. Shell delivers strong oil and gas trading results for the second quarter, driven by market turmoil caused by the Iran war. Oil trading was in line with first quarter numbers, while gas trading was significantly higher. Coming up, we're live in Ankara. We'll be speaking with the Latvian foreign minister at the NATO Summit next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. We are pointed lower in terms of futures, particularly Nasdaq 100 futures. Samsung setting the tone just a little bit. As you can see, S&P 500 futures down just fractionally. We did have losses for the Nasdaq 100 in particular yesterday, but also the S&P. So we may see more or we may bounce back. The 10-year yield is firmly at 450, up more than 3 basis points. And the dollar index relatively unchanged. I do want to point to a higher VIX as well, though we're still below 16. And oil continues to put on some pennies. Crude oil, Brent above $73 a barrel, and WTI headed for $70 a barrel. NATO leaders are gathered in Ankara, Turkey for a summit with wars in the Middle East and Ukraine top of mind. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook is on site for a conversation with the Latvian foreign minister. Ollie.
Yeah, that's right, Vonnie. We're all here in Ankara, Turkey, awaiting the arrival of President Trump. That's sort of a one-year anniversary since that last NATO meeting where they got that 5% commitment of NATO spend on defense. That, of course, was the big topic last year. The question is, how far down the path are we now? We're joined now by Baiba. She is the Latvian foreign minister. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the sidelines of the meeting. I want to take stock of where we are 1 year from that historic NATO meeting. What positive story does NATO have to tell now to President Trump as he arrives here?
Well, we agreed the political declaration very fast, so it will be published tomorrow, so I can't release what's in there. But all the essentials. We perceive Russia, commitment for Ukraine, NATO's own commitment, forces, defense spending, everything is in there, so very good. We have NATO's defense forum taking place here with multi-billion commitments for defense industry improvements, for interoperability, joint production, but also increasing the, for example, battle-decisive munitions, but also the innovation package, drone commitment. So that's the other part. It's not enough just to have the funding. You actually have to deliver capabilities.
Of course, and of course there's also still been this sort of thing that's hanging over NATO. We heard from Pete Hegseth, who visited recently, saying that there's going to be another review over the next 6 months of the American troop posture. How much does that concern you? Do you think that the Europeans are moving fast enough in order to backfill some of those absences from the United States?
Well, we do that together with the US, and it's not like US just wants to get out or something. They have really vested interests in maintaining their presence in Europe. I mean, it's not only about economic and trade relationships, it's the joint defense and security interests that we have geopolitically. So very clearly, that's a commitment, and that's how we are going to do it together, like we did the interim one, we'll do that also. Yes, Europeans have to invest more, they have to perform, they have to do more. And it's not just words, it's actually what matters, how it's delivered.
And we've had some reporting also that the United States may be examining basically who is spending the money, how much, how those who are actually hitting those targets, and maybe rewarding those. And obviously, as a Baltic nation where defense and security is one of your top priorities, could you see yourself benefiting from some of the sort of now tiered system that the United States is suggesting, potentially, for example, getting more troops to Latvia, for example?
I cannot comment on particulars of those arguments, because what we do is we follow what we decided. We decided Russia, and we all know that Russia is a threat to all of us, very clearly. It's a country, nuclear armed country, which decided militarily to attack a peaceful country. So it used military means to achieve political objectives of subjugating Ukraine. They are not succeeding, they won't succeed. But that means that it's a total change in everything. And that's why it's not only defense spending, but actual deployability of troops, capabilities, learning from the battlefields between Ukraine and Russia, especially on the unmanned systems, electronic warfare, communications, satellites, everything around that. So there is a lot we have to do. And this is where NATO is best to do that.
And there seems to have been a real shift in momentum on the battlefield in Ukraine over the last few months. I think that is a conversation and a message that Zelensky will be making to President Trump while he's here. Obviously, things are getting harder for the Russians on the economic front, a lot of strain there. So what is your appraisal of the Russian position now, and how much of a threat is it to Vladimir Putin domestically?
Russia cannot achieve its political objectives through military means. So whether it's the occupation of whole of Ukraine or even Donbass, anything else, Ukraine's technological advancements, the ability to put pressure on Russia through these long-term sanctions, as they call, which means on military objects within Russia, but also on the energy infrastructure, has created such pressure on Russia that it will have to compromise. There is no other way. It will have to settle the war through political means, not through military means. As for all of us in NATO, we have to do what we committed to do. So we are at we will be at 4.91% at the end of the year. 5% is prescribed in law, enshrined by the parliament in unanimous vote. So next year 5%, and we'll continue along that path. And we expect the others also to fulfill their commitments, because at the end, security, there is one security of Euro-Atlantic sphere. NATO has guaranteed its KPI is peace. It's a peace organization. And it has guaranteed peace for our nations since 1949. There is no other way.
And also thinking about Russia with Putin a little bit under pressure, more on the ropes, there are also some risks associated with that. We heard from the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, speaking over the last couple of days, saying that the next few months are going to be decisive, that there might be more pressure coming in to Poland, but also he said for the Baltic states. What are you seeing in terms of additional pressure? What are the risks associated with some of the vulnerabilities that Russia is feeling?
So Russian warfare doctrine is one. It's not just military. It's also non-military, or the sub-conventional. And through these non-military means, whether it's the cyber attacks, whether it's corruption, whether it's hostile information and operations that they run, they also are trying to achieve their objectives. So it's not just the military part. And of course, Russia is trying all types of provocations. We saw attempts at arson of Prime Minister Starmer's properties. We have seen killing of Russian political opponents in Germany and other places. We have seen various jamming activities, whether around Kaliningrad or elsewhere. And we have seen on the Latvian border with Belarus, it's an organized activity of pushing instrumentalized illegal migrants into NATO's territory. So what we are doing, we are ensuring security of border of the EU and NATO, making sure we deter them. Last year we deterred more than 12,000 people. This year it will be even more. So we expect allies to have solidarity also around that. It's not just the military presence, it's not just the military stuff, but also non-military. So whole society approach, awareness, not letting use of cybercrime to become systemic, and so on and so forth. It's a lot.
Well, Baiba, Braze, thank you so much for your time and giving us your perspective ahead of the meeting. That is the foreign minister from Latvia. As we wait for the arrival of the various leaders, including the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who will be arriving in the next few hours.
Ollie, thank you so much. That's Oliver Crook there and Baiba Braze, Latvian foreign minister, and we'll be hearing more from Ollie from NATO over the coming days. Coming up, a look at what's making headlines in your front page news. This is Bloomberg. Now for your front page news, and first up, the Washington Post reporting top Democrats pulling their endorsements of Maine Democratic Senate candidate Graham Plattner after Plattner was accused of sexual assault by a woman he previously dated. Next up, the FT reporting HSBC is halting lending to riskier private clients after high-profile bankruptcies cast doubt on underwriting standards. And finally, the Wall Street Journal on Belgium ending the US's World Cup run. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Vonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Stock futures pointed lower. Samsung's record profit failing to elevate shares after an unprecedented rally. Oil and gas seeing risk getting priced back in after tanker strikes in and around the Strait of Hormuz. And the NATO Summit kicking off in Turkey. Our live update coming from Ankara later on. So as you can see, those futures pointed lower, though we are off our lows. Yesterday, the Nasdaq 100 was up 1.25%, so we're not even giving back as much as we gained yesterday. It's still up 18% year to date, so nobody panic. We had the Philly Stocks Index up 2.2% as well in yesterday's session, but we are seeing memory chip makers sell off in the early trade today. This after Samsung came in with more profit than it's seen in a whole of the previous 2 years. It surged 19-fold its profit for the quarter, and it's really quite a phenomenal showing, but that stock was down more than 10% in South Korea. Russell 2000 futures pointed fractionally higher as well. Yields a little higher across the board, 2 to 3 basis points. We have the 30-year yield breaking 5%, in fact, and the 10-year yield was above 450 a little bit earlier on. And then just to take a look at the energy complex, we are seeing just $1 or $2 being put on Brent, New York crude, and particularly European gas futures, as we do see a strike or two happening in and around the Strait of Hormuz, and some warnings that ships better stick to their routes. Let's get to some individual movers, though, this pre-market with Chloe Melee in London.
Good morning, Vonnie. Micron is down almost 6% this morning after Samsung results failed to impress. This is now raising fresh questions about the sustainability of those AI investments and whether those sky-high valuations in that sector still make sense. So we're seeing a bit of weakness there for Micron. Moving on to some M&A, and we've got Vertex buying Crinetics Pharma for $10 billion. This is the largest ever deal for Vertex, and it's something that will give it access to more the endocrinology side of this pharmaceutical space. And so we're up, as we can see here, almost 100% for Crinetics. So a very, very big boost. And finally, Fiserv is up this morning after a report from the Wall Street Journal that some big Wall Street banks had held preliminary talks about potentially buying a debit network that is owned by that company. And so we're talking about Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Bank of America. And so on the back of that report, we're seeing a big boost for those shares, up more than 7% for that company in pre-market trading.
All right, Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe Melee there in London. That blowout result from Samsung failing to impress investors, a slump in Samsung shares dragging AI-related stocks down in U.S. pre-market trading, particularly memory chip makers. Joining us now is Katrina Dudley, Senior Investment Strategist at Franklin Templeton. Now, Katrina, I have to ask you, look, Samsung has had such a run, but if you're down, what is it now, 7.6%, you can't ignore that, right? I mean, is this the end of a trade that has been played out or the beginning of something new?
So I think the fact is it it's not that Samsung missed expectations. They didn't. They failed to be impressive, I think is the word that people are using, and that is bleeding into other concerns about the market in terms of the AI infrastructure trade has been the big driver of the market. If I look, the technology sector has been the biggest and the strongest performing sector within the S&P 500 year to date as well. So I think people are saying, is this the sign that things are starting to crack? I would say that we continue to be bullish on AI infrastructure spending, and what we've seen in other companies that have sold off, initially they sell off, but people are using this as an opportunity to buy the dip. And so with Samsung, I think you really want to watch what happens over the next day or two, and whether investors are using this as an opportunity to say, yes, I missed that 150% rally that I've had, and step in.
Is there also, though, something percolating there about having to pay the piper? So if you've gotten your 100 or your 200% return on something, and if that stock is doing extraordinarily well, that company is doing extraordinarily well, some other part of the economy must be having to suffer at some point.
Yes, so number one, I think there's one trade out there, or one kind of school of thought that's saying everyone needs to raise money to invest in the SpaceX IPO as it enters the index. So that's kind of first negative, and it's just a small amount of incremental selling, so that you could definitely go into that negative camp. The second thing, however, is people are curious as to whether or not this is, as we talk about the proverbial canary in the coal mine, is this the start of the unwind of the AI trade, which has been a big driver of the market. You combine that with the fact that if I look at the market generally, we have seen a broadening trade. So we've seen more than half of about 231 stocks in the S&P 500 up year to date, but we still have seen slightly less than 200 stocks being down year to date. So you haven't had full broadening of the market, number one. Number two, the Mag 7 has actually underperformed. It is the one sector that is not kind of touching all-time highs. So I look at some of the those Mag 7 stocks as well. So you've got Samsung over here. Is this a buying opportunity? The second thing I would be seriously considering, is it a buying opportunity as well within the Mag 7?
Really? Like where, for example, Tesla?
I think that you want to diversify on the Mag 7. I think trying to to pick specific parts of it is kind of difficult. But in looking at that entire basket, it's kind of in that oversold territory. So if you're trading off, do I buy the dip in Samsung, or do I look at buying into the Mag 7? I would probably trend towards that Mag 7 trade.
Yeah, well, Tesla has had a little bit of a run up. Nvidia, though, not so much. It's incredible. The International Value Fund that you run, you're looking for capital appreciation, less so income. Obviously, you'd like some income. Where are you looking to maybe dispose of some of your winnings and maybe deploy them somewhere else?
So if I take a look at the markets generally, in terms of the US has obviously been the big standout performer. So international hasn't been such a big part of the market, but I think emerging markets is one area where we're seeing a lot of opportunity and we're seeing a lot of positive momentum. And so I would be looking at emerging markets.
Where though? Because Asia, emerging markets might be a little difficult.
Yeah, you're saying basically in terms of, is it Korea or not Korea is one of the things.
Or do you avoid all that and just go to Latin America,
Latin America has definitely different opportunities. It has cheaper valuations. On the Korea trade, it's kind of interesting because some of the indexes classify it as an emerging market. Some have it as a developed market. So it's kind of one of those markets that's on the cusp. But there are a lot of different emerging markets that have a lot of different opportunities to them and are not as heavily exposed to the AI trade. So if you are concerned about the AI and that infrastructure trade, if you do believe in broadening, this is one area where you can express that opportunity.
Now, your Global Discovery Fund does include the US, so are you seeing that you're adding more in US or outside the US into that fund in particular?
I would say in the United States market, we continue to be bullish. I think that we continue to think that this broadening trade has legs. And when I look at having a broadening trade, that means that there are more stocks that are going to carry the weight. As I've said, you've got an oversold position in the Mag 7 that could open up an opportunity there, but we always have to be valuation sensitive. So I want to look at the market as a whole, and therefore what you want to say is what type of exposures am I looking for and what valuations are I paying for those. When you've got that broadening trade, though, I think that what we've seen is that for such a long period of time you had had to own 7 stocks or you kind of had 493. What we're now seeing is it's actually a much more broad set of stocks that you can pick and where those opportunities are.
What do you make of the yield curve moves? Because we saw the yield curve steepen when, flatten, although, the overall yields went higher, right, when Kevin Warsh came in. Now we're seeing sort of the back end steepen a little bit, but it looks like the employment situation isn't as healthy as we thought. So how do you think about all that going forward? Do we get a hike, a hold, a cut?
I think that the economy is strong, and that's the feedback. And I know that we saw, a slightly disappointing number on the jobs front, but we still saw job growth. And I think the concern that people have had is that jobs have not been added. So I'm in the camp that we have got a lot of signs that are showing to us that the economy is strong. And that means that the Fed is kind of coming from a position of strength. It's not looking at making significant moves. The market is pricing in around it's kind of a 1.5 camp with 25 basis points, between 25 and 50 basis points. I think that we're not necessarily sure that we're not in the camp that thinks that we need to hike rates. We're looking at the inflation number. So a lot of people are looking at the most recent print and saying it's all energy prices, and so that's temporary. We're likely to see those kind of abate as we start to have, despite the news yesterday on the Strait of Hormuz, we're likely to have stability in energy prices. However, we're of the opinion that what you've seen is a lot of reshoring of manufacturing back into the United States, and that is likely to be inflationary, and you combine that with a strong employment number. I think that the Fed is likely to sit tight.
All right, Katrina, thank you so much for the update. I love you coming into studio always. Katrina Dudley of Franklin Templeton. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. China buying more soybeans from the US. According to sources, China's state-owned firm COFCO has booked at least 6 cargoes of US soybeans for loading between September and October. Beijing and Washington seeking to roll back duties on some agricultural products after recent talks. SpaceX is getting an early vote of confidence from Wall Street. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and at least 4 other brokers have started coverage with buy-equivalent ratings after its IPO. SpaceX joins the Nasdaq 100 today. De Beers is making some of its deepest ever price cuts for diamonds. This comes after it reduced the number of its hand-picked buyers, a strategy to funnel more diamonds to its strongest customers. The exact scale of the price cuts was not immediately clear. A nice problem to have. Coming up, oil climbing after fresh attacks on ships transiting the Hormuz Strait. We'll bring you the latest. This is Bloomberg.
I went in for one reason, very strongly, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm not looking for regime change, although this is regime change. The first regime is gone. The second regime is gone. And I think the third regime is more reasonable, but we'll find out.
The latest attacks on ships in and around the Strait of Hormuz raising concerns over the US-Iran deal. Sources telling Bloomberg that a Qatari LNG carrier was hit by a projectile near the Omani coast. Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar is back with us. How seriously will this attack be taken, and the strikes that we've seen recently, Abir, will it jeopardize any peace talks?
Good morning, Vonnie. Yeah, it's unclear for the time being if this will have a monumental impact on the wider peace talks. Now, it is surprising that this attack happened during the mass funeral of the late supreme leader in Iran that is set to end by the end of this week in Tehran, where he will later be buried in his hometown. But what we know about this attack so far is that this is an LNG-laden ship linked to Qatar that was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz in the early hours of Tuesday, and it was essentially attacked. Our understanding is that it was attacked because it did not stick to the route that Iran had laid out. Now, what this means for the wider talks, well, this is not the first time something like this happens. Even when the MOU was signed, we've seen such attacks happening in the Strait of Hormuz because ships were not sticking to the route, again, that Iran had laid out in the Strait of Hormuz. Those ships were going in the part that is closer to the Omani coast, which Iran refuses to allow ships to go through, and it says ships have to get closer to the borders of the Iranian coast. And so unclear if it will have an impact on the wider negotiations. We don't have a statement from Qatar yet. We don't have a statement from the American side. Previously, when these attacks have happened, we've seen limited reactions or retaliation by the American side, but we're not seeing that yet. We know that the American side and President Trump has suspended the talks for this funeral taking place in Iran this week, but the talks are expected, or the technical negotiations, Vani, are expected to carry on after the funeral, where, as you just heard in what President Trump was saying, the nuclear component will be key, it will be front and center, and that will lead to the wider permanent ceasefire, along with, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, the oil sanctions, and the blocked frozen assets for Iran.
Yeah, and those 60 days are counting down. Abir, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar in Dubai. Over in Turkey, NATO leaders are gathered in Ankara, including President Trump and President Zelensky. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Oliver Crook, who is on site. Ollie, you've been managing to speak with some European leaders and global leaders, essentially. What is the message that NATO will be enthusiastic about sharing with the world after the summit?
Yeah, it's really a message that they'll be enthusiastic with sharing with President Trump, who 12 months ago at the NATO meeting in The Hague really won one of his greatest foreign policy achievements since he took over office, which was getting all NATO members to commit to spend 5% of their GDP on military and defense. Obviously, the United States has for a very long time, for many years, even before President Trump, tried to get the Europeans to spend that money on defense. They basically failed to do so until now, and that was really something that the Trump administration could say was a very big win geopolitically and in terms of their foreign policy. Now, in the last 12 months since then, a lot of other things have happened in American foreign policy, including the war in Iran. We also had at the beginning of the year all this talk about Greenland. All of these kinds of things are things that are capable of sort of derailing this summit. You hope that you don't hear any mention of Greenland. That will be the European hope. You hope that in terms of Iran, they can keep that conversation relatively contained. And of course, there is about the question about the future of the alliance. Trump has repeatedly sort of threatened and made assertions and allusions to the fact that potentially he is unwilling to come to the rescue of NATO under Article 5. However, it seems now that that main threat has sort of dissipated, but there is now more of a conversation within the Trump administration that there could be a sort of tiered system in NATO. For those who are really meeting those commitments, those that are spending that money, they may get more benefits from the United States, while others may get them sort of held back. So those are going to be some of the things that we're watching for very closely. As we heard earlier from the Latvian foreign minister, apparently the wording on the communique came together pretty quickly, pretty unanimous. We don't know what's in it yet, but that certainly is a positive side, at least from the European side of this question.
Yeah, and in fact, from the US side, we know already, Donald Trump has told us that one of the only reasons he's going is because of his relationship with Erdogan, the Turkish Prime Minister, and the host of the summit this year. The New York Times actually reporting that Trump is ready to restore access to the F-35 stealth fighter to Turkey. What would be the context for this, and how big of a decision would this be, Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Turkey and sort of its role geopolitically and its role within NATO is absolutely massive, and it's something that the president of Turkey, Erdogan, is going to put on full display in these sort of discussions that are happening here over the next 2 days. I mean, it is the biggest military in NATO on this side of the Atlantic. The only one that's bigger in NATO is the United States. They have a massive standing army, but they also have a very large military industrial base, one that the Europeans really need to benefit from, because though you can spend, billions and billions of dollars, you need stuff to buy and you need stuff that is actually deliverable, and that is something that's a role that Turkey is certainly going to be playing. There is this question also about F-35s. It was in fact the Trump administration that had blocked the selling of F-35s to Turkey. There is some reporting around this. We had it from the New York Times saying that now President Trump potentially is willing to extend that olive branch to the Turkish regime, and effectively saying that they're willing now potentially to deliver those F-35s to Turkey. But again, it puts into sort of great prominence, into sharp relief, the role that Erdogan has had, not just geopolitically, not just militarily, but of course in terms of diplomacy. He's been involved as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. He's been involved in the discussions around Iran, and remember in the conflict with Israel and Hamas, also involved there, and has been a very close friend to the President of the United States, who, Vani, as you said, basically said he may not even attend this NATO meeting were it not held here in Turkey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ollie, thank you. We'll be speaking to you throughout the day and, of course, tomorrow as well from the NATO Summit. That's Oliver Crook. Bloomberg's Ankara coverage continues today with interviews with Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, and High Representative of the European Union, Kaja Kallas. Back in the US, President Trump praising Walmart for lowering prices on some products and urging other retailers to follow suit. Writing in a social media post that the move comes, quote, at my administration's request to celebrate our great country's 250th birthday. Joining us now is Bloomberg opinion columnist Andrea Felsted. Well, thanks to the quincentennial, Andrea, or the semi-quincentennial, we can now get cheaper ground beef and Coca-Cola and so on. But was Walmart planning on doing this anyway, given competition from the likes of Target and Aldi?
Absolutely. The US grocery market is becoming more competitive. You've got a new CEO at Kroger who actually used to be at Walmart, and he's talked about cutting thousands of prices. Amazon, Costco, they're very good competitors to Walmart. And you've also got Aldi, 2,700 stores in the US. We know in Britain that when the German discounters expand, then other sales suffer. So yes, this is more to do with the dynamics of the US grocery market.
Now, can Walmart do this? I mean, essentially all of these things are commodities, and you would think that most of these grocery retailers get them at the same price as each other. But who can make the better margins from that, distribution-wise and storage-wise and so on?
Probably Walmart. It's the biggest, so it's got more clout with suppliers. And the other thing is it has been growing well. So suppliers like to reserve their best special offers for those supermarkets that are doing best, and Walmart fits that bill.
Andrea, what else should we be on the lookout for when it comes to the retail space at the moment? How is the consumer faring? Are there any reads that we can take from anything that any of the retailers, luxury or otherwise, are telling us?
Well, US general retail actually did better than was expected, mainly because of the tax refunds. So that really eased the shock of higher gasoline prices. Will be interesting to see what the next retail sales and the next set of results say, whether people are a bit more hopeful now that gas prices have come down a little bit, but also now that the tax refunds that has abated. When it comes to luxury, the US is still doing fine. You know, as long as the stock market can keep powering ahead, it tends to be correlated with spending on Cartier watches, Chanel handbags. If we get a market rout, if the expected correction in tech stocks that some are predicting materialises, that will be a whole different story.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much. Andrea Felsted of Bloomberg Opinion. Coming up, we're going to get you set up for your Tuesday trading session. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York, and now a look at what's ahead today. First up, we get ADP employment data. That's out at 8:15 Eastern, followed by the U.S. trade balance, which comes out at 8:30 Eastern. Then more Fed speak, this time Fed Vice Chair for Supervision, Michelle Bowman. She speaks at noon. And then $58 billion of three-year Treasury notes on auction at 1 p.m. Plus, don't forget, SpaceX joining the NASDAQ 100 today. Here are some micro movers. So Micron Technology, along with many other memory chip stocks in particular, sliding after Samsung profits were up 19-fold, but still fails to impress. Then we have Crinetics Pharma up almost 100%, a real massive mover. Vertex Pharma agreeing to buy the company for $10 billion in cash. Vertex's largest deal ever. And then Fiserv up another 7%. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that banks, including JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, have held talks to acquire its debit network. This is your macro picture as we head into Tuesday.